My name is Michael Wallace, and I'm conducting this interview for the Veterans Oral History Collection for the Fairhope Public Library. I'm interviewing my uncle, Mr. Chester Feagin, on Saturday, January the 18th, 2025, in Mobile, Alabama, at my Uncle Chester's apartment. So, Chester, your full name, if you just tell us that and your date of birth.
Claudia Chester Feagin, Jr.
And you were born in 1925 in
Florida? Born August 16th, 1925 in Hollywood, Florida.
And you enlisted in the U.S. Navy during World War II.
I enlisted in the Navy in April 1943 and was discharged on December the 12th, 1945 in Nashville, Tennessee.
What rank were you when you were discharged?
I was a fireman first class, EMGY. That's electrician's mate, gyro technician.
But that's not your only military service. Subsequent to that, you were in the U.S. Air Force.
The Korean War broke out, and I did not want to go back in the Navy, so I enlisted in the Air Force and went to Maxwell Air Force Base, never went to boot camp, and wound up in officers' records. And from there, I got transferred to Mountain Home Air Force Base, where I was in records, and then they later put me into several things, but I finally got into transportation, which was where I had all my experience. I applied for a commission in transportation, and while I was in transportation, the captain came by and said, "Sergeant, I want you to teach this lieutenant all about transportation." He was a brand new second lieutenant right out of Boston College with a degree in journalism. And I looked at the captain and he looked at me and he said, "I know what you're thinking and I fully agree." But I didn't let that stop me. I went ahead and started teaching him to where he would be a good transportation officer. After that, I found a one-page regulation that allowed me to transfer from the Air Force to the Army to go through OCS. And it came through on April 2nd, 1953. I went through basic training, leadership school, and then on into Fort Sill, where I went through 30 weeks in field artillery. On July the 14th, we got our commission. 2 weeks later, the war ended between the Koreans and us. And at that point, I was stationed in Fort Benning, Georgia, with a National Guard unit, and we had quite a group there, and they were out of Louisiana, and it was a real experience for me.
So it's a fascinating story. So you were in the Navy and the Air Force and the Army.
Right.
And all of that happened before you were 30 years old.
Right.
That truly is an amazing story. Can you lift your hat up just a little so we see? There you go. Thank you.
I was the oldest man in my battery going through OCS. I was 27. And if I'd have got in there to try to get in there 2 months later, I couldn't have, because I was past the age that they would let in.
They didn't call you Grandpappy or anything,
yeah.
Did they? Well, that's a fantastic story. I'm going to have a whole lot more questions about this if you got the time to answer them. When you first went in the Navy, were you still in high school?
I never had graduated from high school. I'd already left. I'd quit and gone to work.
Oh, I see. Why did you decide to join the Navy?
That was what I was always wanted to do, was to go in the Navy, and then the war came on, and I went ahead and enlisted in the Navy. One of the things about everything in the military, you got 4 branches. 2 of them are fighters, and the other 2 are the support units. And I prefer to be in the support, keep giving them help, and I served on an ammunition ship where we passed ammunition in the Pacific Ocean from ship to ship while underway. And then we went into Iwo Jima. We were there when they raided it. And I saw the Marines going up Mount Suribachi, and I saw the Navy Seabees clearing runways for the aircraft, and the Japanese had never seen an aircraft that big. We were about 500 yards off of Iwo Jima, and I was watching the Marines go up Mount Suribachi and the Seabees clearing off runways, and a couple of rounds hit close to our ship, and the skipper said, "We're out of here." So we were out of there. We went into Okinawa, and the kamikazes were so heavy till we were never allowed within 35 miles of the island. But we continued to pass ammunition while underway to every type of ship. Our best day in passing ammunition was 720 tons.
720 tons of ammunition one day.
One day.
What was the name of your ship?
USS Wrangell, Wrangell, and our sister ship was the Mount Hood, and the Mount Hood blew up. That's my phone. Our sister ship blew up in the Pacific. We had her keys and they had ours, but we never got a chance to get them back. They had 5 survivors. They were the ones that were ashore getting in movies and mail. All the rest of them went up with that explosion.
How tragic! Were they hit by something, or was it an internal explosion?
When the Japanese torpedo, I think it was.
Oh, how awful! The grace of God. What was the rank of your commander, your skipper on that ship?
Our skipper's name was Haskell.
Was he a captain?
He was a commander.
Commander.
While we were along, we passed ammunition to the USS Missouri. Bull Halsey was the admiral aboard. That was his staff ship, and they went to school together at Annapolis. And Admiral Halsey kept saying, "Where's the ammunition?" And we heard that going on, so then we loaded the decks with ammunition. And then we started yelling across, "When you gonna take it?" We had the decks full of ammunition. But you just don't pick on the skipper.
There you go. Not when he's got that crew behind him. How many people were in the crew, do you know?
Our ship component was 255.
255 people. That's what. When you where did you say you went to basic training in the Navy?
In the Navy, I went through 3 whole weeks at Brunson Field, Florida, outside of Pensacola. And when I went to the Air Force, I didn't go to basic training.
Right.
But the Army got even. When I went in there, I got the full blast. 16 weeks of basic, 7 weeks of leadership school, and then I went to OCS, and that's when they turned me into a real soldier. I knew how to dress like one and how to act like one.
How to return those salutes too, huh?
Yep.
So 3 weeks in basic training and straight out to the Pacific on that ammunition ship.
Yeah, that took a course. I was at Whiting Field, and I put in for a school, an electrical school, and I got accepted. So I went to Moorhead, Kentucky for 16 weeks for electrical school, and then I went from there to San Francisco to Treasure Island and went to the gyro compass school, and from there they sent me to the holding pond up in Rhode Island. Then we got our ship that was commissioned in Norfolk, and we loaded it at Red Bank, New Jersey, and then we went down and through the canal, and on the way out we had orders to come into Pearl Harbor. It was something they wouldn't put on the radio. So I spent 2 days in what was just a holding. It wasn't a state. So I got that foreign country. And later I went back there and visited when it was a state, so I got them both. But
That's a
after
good
we got
story,
our
too.
orders, we went out on Christmas Eve, 1944. We set sail for the Marshall Islands, where we met up with the other crews. And from there we went to Carolina Islands and operated out of there until we went into Leyte.
That's where you got the Philippine Liberation Medal over the Leyte campaign. When you were part of the commissioning crew on that ship. It was brand new when y'all got on it. Huh?
That's right.
How fascinating! And the Panama Canal. I'd love to see something like that one day. So you actually did stop in Pearl Harbor, and your
We
wartime
stopped in
cruise
Pearl
embarked
Harbor,
there.
and I swapped Liberty with one of the guys that was wanting to go with a buddy of his. And then on Christmas Day, I was going to be getting to go ashore, but we weren't. I was waving bye to Pearl Harbor as we sailed out to sea. And going in, I got a chance to see the ships that had already been sunken and memorialized by the Japanese. But one of the nicest stories about Pearl Harbor was after they bombarded it, President Roosevelt sent Admiral Nimitz over to do something about what was there. And they took Admiral Nimitz all over the place, and they got back, and he said, "That's good." They said, "John, Admiral, how can that be?" He said, "Well, they didn't bother your gas tanks. You got all of them. They didn't bother your shipyard. They didn't help that. So we can have our ships back into the sea in 3 months' time. That's what's good." But he never looked at anything negative, and that's how he won the Battle of Midway, and he was also the mastermind of the battle in the Philippines.
And you got to share a name with him a little bit there too, huh?
Yeah.
I'd be proud of that. I personally always admired Chester Nimitz. Well, did you get liberty in any of those islands, or did you have to stay on the ship the whole time?
Well, they would we got to go in when we were docked, when we were anchored in Carolina Islands. We went into the Mogmog Island, and we went about every third day. We had liberty go in, and I didn't drink, and we always got 2 cans of beer, and the buddies on the ship always got them. I didn't drink. And then when we got to the Philippine Islands, we were at Luzon and Leyte, and we would go in every third day, and same thing, have 2 cans of beer, but I gave them away.
Were you on the beach or in a city?
He's on the beach, and you went in, and the people they were busy selling stuff to us or swapping them for mattress covers or whatever. They were real friendly people.
They wore their shirts by then, though, didn't they?
But on August the 15th, the Japanese surrendered. And the next day, I was no longer a teenager.
Oh, that did line up that right. So
Yeah.
you turned 18 the day after the VJ Day.
And I said, thank God. But then when that happened, I got up top. I heard a commotion all up top side. I went climbing the ladders up to the top of there, and I said, "All this racket, you think the war is over?" And they said, "It is." And the sky was lit up with rockets, flares, anything that would make a show. And all the ship's lights went on. That's the first time we'd ever seen them on. And they were celebrating.
Where was your ship then?
In Leyte Gulf.
You're still in Leyte Gulf?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We were there loading up, getting ready to go for the invasion of Japan, which we were glad we didn't have to. They dropped the 2 atomic bombs. Harry Truman, he had the guts enough. He dropped 2. The Japanese had no way of knowing it, but that was all we had.
That's right.
And they had surrendered.
Luckily, it was enough, huh?
Yeah.
I appreciate your service, Uncle Chester. So, well, did the So the ship, when it came back to the United States, did it come back to San Francisco?
We came back to the United States, to Red Bank, in December 1945. And I left the ship, went to New York, and from there to Nashville, Tennessee, where I was separated on December the 12th.
In Nashville, Tennessee?
Yeah.
How'd you get home?
I caught the Hummingbird and rode all the way home.
The Hummingbird, that's a train?
Train.
Wow. Wish that one still ran. Well, if you don't mind, ask a couple of questions about that. When you went to that gyro compass school, did you actually work the gyro compass after you got on the ship, or?
Yes, I was it.
Wow.
And then we had some problems, and we got another gyro compass guy. So the two of us took care of the gyro. That's all we did. But it was, and because of the problems, the repeaters from the main one wasn't synchronized like they needed to be, or at least they didn't get a reading. So they had us where every hour on the hour they'd call and get the reading from the gyro, and they were matching, but they didn't quit doing it until the day we come off the ship.
Where was your battle station on the ship?
It was in the TI&E room.
TI&E room, is that next to the bridge?
No, that's down in the bottom, down underneath the mess hall.
Not a healthy place to be in a fight.
Oh, we wasn't scared of nothing but thunder and lightning, and you can't hear it thunder when you're at sea.
So every kind of ammunition you could think of was on that ship, I suppose.
We had 1,000-pound bombs, we had 500-pound bombs, we had 16-inch projectiles, we had 12-inch, 5-inch, we had for the submarine, that we had the mines for them.
Wow.
And when we transferred ammunition ship, we might have the admiral and his battleship on one side and a carrier on the other side, or we might have a destroyer and a battleship on the other side, or we might even have a cruiser and a destroyer on the other side. But we'd have two ships riding along at full speed, passing ammunition.
Did your crew have a reunion ever, or after the war? Or?
We had one much later in the 1900s at Charleston, South Carolina, and we made it into an organization, a non-profit organization with memberships and everything. And they got with the other ammunition ships, and the ammunition ships and the oilers became one ship. They carried the oil and the ammunition, so they could service both parts when they were there. And now there's an AOE organization, which is ammunition and oilers.
Oh, okay. Well, it was only the one reunion then, huh?
Yep.
Do you know any of the rest of the crew ever?
Not anymore.
All gone, huh?
Most of them. The ones I knew are gone.
I expect that's true. You
I'm 99.
And you were 17 when they were all relying on you to work that compass.
I was 19.
Oh, I get it. I see.
But when we were going through gyro compass school, it was in San Francisco at Treasure Island, and we could see Alcatraz. And with our binoculars, we could look and see what was going on Alcatraz. The biggest difference between the two of us was every third night we had liberty and they didn't.
They didn't get liberty very often, did they?
They never get any.
Was that gyro compass, was that technology secret at the time? Did you need a security
Sperry was the manufacturer of the compass, and it was the number one compass for the plane, and it was mounted on with piano wire, and it was accurate. And at the time they were making them, it had a little hunt in it, and somebody was putting it together. They made a misconnection, which happened to be the right connection, and it took the hunt out of it. And they had spent thousands and thousands of dollars trying to get that hunt out of it. so it was steady what we had.
Fixed it by accident, huh? Well, when you left to go off to World War II, was your family living in Mobile, your entire family at the time?
They came down and saw me get on the train going up to Birmingham, and then I got up there and they swore us in and took us back to Bronson Field. Went through 3 weeks of boot camp, and then I went into they taught us karate and they taught us all kind of stuff. And then we gassed up all the planes for the cadets. And then the open Whiting Field, and we went over there and started, because they didn't even have hot water. And we went on that one, and we managed to help build the roads and the barracks.
How do you think your family felt about it when you were leaving to go off to the war? Were they scared or for you or proud of you or both?
I don't know. We weren't scared of nothing.
Some things never change, huh?
To this day, I'm not afraid of anything.
I've noticed that. Well, so you came right back to Mobile after you were discharged from the Navy?
I came straight back here, and then I went back to Murphy High School and got my diploma, because when I went in the Navy, they gave you a battery of tests, and I passed all those tests with flying colors, but I didn't have a diploma. They called me in to talk to me about it and offered me several officer schools, and I told them I didn't have a diploma. They said, you can't go then. So I went through it, and several things come up. I could have gone to officers training, but I didn't have a high school diploma. So I came back home, and in one semester, I got 14 credits and graduated from Murphy in January 1947.
That's amazing. They didn't give you any flack about going back to high school, huh? They just let you come back?
Well, I went to night school, but no, I fully intended to go back and get that diploma. It had already cost me one time. I wasn't going to let that be a stopping point anywhere else.
Such an amazing...
All my life, I kept telling Donnie, anytime something come up, I can do anything I set my mind to.
Donnie was your wife.
And when we were expecting our first child that we didn't get to keep, she was making bibs for it. She said, you can't embroider bibs. I said, okay. So I watched her, and at night she would fix our supper, and then one night she says, I'm making good time with this one. I said, you ought to, I'm helping you. She said, no, you're not. She looked at it and she said, yes, you are. Then she got me a bib and some hooks, and I did my own all the way through. I was doing French knots and back stitches and everything else. But she didn't show me how. I just did it by watching her.
Watch and learn. Well, and so then you were out of the service for nearly 5 years or so before the Korean conflict started up. Did you elect to join the Air Force?
I'd like to go. I didn't want to go back to the Navy.
Did you think they were going to call you up, or?
Oh, all of us were in reserves when we came out.
So your reserve service wasn't up yet?
When we were discharged into the reserves. And I didn't want to go back into the Navy, so I went down and enlisted in the Air Force. And then when I tried to get a commission in transportation, they turned me down. And I said, no way, Jose. And I started in, and I found out how to get to OCS. And I went through that. And 2 weeks after I got the commission, they quit fighting. But that wasn't my hand. That was the Lord's hand. He didn't want me to go back over that way.
It sounds like it. So when you went into the Air Force,
I went in the National Guard after I got home.
I see.
And I really enjoyed it. The troops didn't at first, but then when we went to summer camp and before we came back, they hated my guts. But when they won every ribbon there was, they didn't hate me no more.
They liked it better then. How long did you stay in the reserves? That was Army Reserves.
5 years.
Right? And so did you go to Camp Shelby?
Yeah, I made first lieutenant in the National Guard, and I was up for captain, but I was traveling and couldn't be at the meetings, and I decided to get out because going to summer camp and expecting the troops to do what you say do when they hadn't seen you for the whole year was just a little more than I was willing to do.
Well, let's go back to the Air Force for a minute. You they let you skip basic training because you were coming out of the reserves, I suppose.
I never did know what the reasoning was because I never had been in the Air Force. But when I got to Montgomery, they sent me over there, and because I had typing and stuff that I could do, they sent me down over to Gunner Air Force Base to be a morning clerk. But the captain, his name was Diver, he saw my credentials and everything, and he sent them somebody else and kept me in the personnel working with men's, and I wound up working on officers' records.
Where is Gunner Air Force Base?
It's in Montgomery.
Montgomery?
On the opposite side of Maxwell.
Oh, I see. But you went somewhere else later on in the Air Force.
From there, I was transferred to Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho.
Mountain Home Air Force Base?
And while I was there, we were getting ready to go to Tripoli on a reconnaissance type thing. We were going to be bombarding them with literature and stuff, psychological warfare. And and one of the sergeants was on his way out to be shipped out, and on Welcome Travelers, they asked him, and he spilled the whole works about how we were going to get this, and we were going to do psychological warfare. And when that got to the Pentagon, they changed the orders, and in that change, I got busy and then transferred to the Air Force. I'm for the Army.
I see. And that happened on the same day. You went out of the Air Force and into the Army on the same day?
Well, when I was getting discharged, they discharged me from the Air Force, but I was right there, and they made me enlist and see I do for the Army before they give me the discharge from the Air Force.
They didn't want you to get away.
No, they wanted to give you. They're afraid if they give me the discharge, I wouldn't say I do.
When you went into the Air Force, did you go in at the same rank you were when you left the Navy?
I went in as a PFC, and we found a regulation. I was moved up to a corporal. I got it within 4 weeks after I got in. And when I went to I got promoted to sergeant up in Idaho. And so I went to OC. I went through basic training. I went through basic training as a sergeant, corporal then, because they had changed this thing. But there was no longer a buck sergeant. It was corporal, and then went to staff sergeant.
Oh, I see. And so then when they moved you to the Army, you originally went in at that same rank?
I went in as corporal.
Oh, I see. But that didn't last long because...
Well, I got through basic training and leadership, and then I went through OCS, and I graduated and had my second lieutenant.
And so when you discharged out of the regular Army, you were still a second lieutenant, but you were promoted to first lieutenant in the reserves?
In the reserves.
Okay, I got it.
Well, got my commission on July the 14th, 1953. October the 1st, 1953, I got discharged because a regulation came down. If you had 2 years enlisted or commissioned, you could apply for discharge. And Donnie's mother was out there with 2 small children and a widow. And Donnie says to me, well, as long as you couldn't get out of this man's army, I'm going to be here. but now she can't. I'm going home, get a job and a place for us. If you want to come, fine. If you don't want to come, that's fine. But she was more concerned about her sisters and her mother. And
That's
I
who
knew
those two small children were, huh?
Yep. Pat was about 9 years old and Joe was about 3 or something like that.
Joe is my mother.
Yep.
So, is there something that you would like to add or comment on?
Can't think of nothing.
Would you mind telling us what those ribbons are on your hat?
Yeah. This one is the American Theater. That was the Atlantic. All we did, we was in it coming down to go through the canal. This one is the Asiatic Pacific. And I got 3 stars in there. One was for Iwo Jima, one was for Okinawa, and one was for the Japanese, the Philippines. That's the Philippine ribbon. And then there's the Victory Medal. And so I got it over here.
Victory Medal on the back there, huh?
Yeah.
Should have been a good conduct medal in there somewhere, don't you think?
Well, you had to have 4 years to get good conduct.
Oh,
I didn't stay long enough.
Uncle Chester, I really appreciate your time to do this. If the folks at the library decide that we might want to add to this one day, we may want to do this again one day. And
Okay.
that's a really remarkable record. I don't think that it's very common that somebody managed to serve successfully in all 3 branches of service that way.
Well, when I went to do some things, I had 5 discharges. I learned how to get out.
Yeah, you were getting good at getting out, huh? I think some of the military people here would admire that skill.
Well, I love my country, and I would have given my life for it, and I never would have been any other way.